Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today is a very special episode. We're bringing on Matt DeLorenzo, he is the author of Mercedes-AMG Race-bred Performance. And for those of you that have been listening to the show for a long time, you know I love promoting authors. I love promoting books. But, man, this one is special. It's a beautifully bound book. The photos, the journalism, everything. It's just really top-notch. And excited to get into this with you. So, first off, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, Matt. So I had the privilege of looking at the book. Hardcover, it's beautifully bound. I mean, it's coming out. This is a pre-order right now. It's available on Amazon. It'll be actually live starting November 4th. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so you can get in on the pre-order and all that good stuff and go and pick up a copy for yourself. But first thing first, Matt, I want to know, whenever I have a new author on here, I want to know, what was the original idea? When did you know that this was going to be a book?
Well, actually, I've been writing about cars for over 40 years. And last summer, I was looking for a project, and I've been working with Motor Books as an author with them in the past. I've done a number of books with them, and I called and I said, "You got anything for me?" And they had done a book a few years earlier on BMW M, which is their performance division. And so they looked around and they went, well, nobody has really done anything on AMG. So they said, are you interested? And I said, sure.
Wow.
So it was really terrific. I took on the project a year ago, July, and I learned a lot. I mean, it was really, you end up going down a lot of rabbit holes on the internet, and just the history of this company was really interesting. Because, you know, everybody knows AMG. You see G-Wagons at the AMG badge, all that.
Of course.
It did not start out as a division of Mercedes. It was actually two engineers who had worked for Mercedes in the 60s. And they met, and it's kind of an odd couple. One was an engineer, one was a test engineer, and they didn't get along at first. But the one test engineer recognized the mechanical genius of Erhard Melcher, the M in AMG, and the other guy, Hans Werner Aufrecht, they decided to build engines for race cars. And so that's what the AMG is. It's Aufrecht, Melcher, and then the G is, which is the town that Aufrecht was from. So that's the AMG.
Wow.
So when they were doing the tuning back in the 60s, Mercedes wasn't particularly pleased to have these guys messing around with their cars. Because at the time, and even Aufrecht admits it, everybody thought, well, there's nothing wrong with the Mercedes. It's perfect. But through their racing success and being able to offer among the racers more power out of these cars, they gained a reputation for being sort of performance meisters in Germany. And people started wanting that same performance for their road cars. So they started doing road cars. They moved to larger facilities. They were able to do wheels and tires and spoilers and paint jobs. They really did make some unique vehicles. And then in the mid-'80s, they introduced a car globally, but it had a huge impact in the U.S., was basically a mid-size E-Class car called the Hammer. And it had a V8 engine. It was really fast. It was on the cover of all the car magazines. It was very expensive. But that really got Mercedes' attention. And then on the other side of it, through their racing efforts, they helped Mercedes win a bunch of races in the German touring car series. So Mercedes said, hey, you guys really have something here. So in 1990, they allowed the road cars to be sold through Mercedes dealers, the AMG products. And that started the road to the relationship of Mercedes acquiring them. They took over about half of the company. In 1999, 2005, they bought the rest of the company, and the Mercedes-AMG performance brand was born.
When you were researching this, and as you were kind of digging and going further, and I know you've been writing for a long time, so I'm sure you had a certain amount of knowledge, but as you dug deeper and you were in the thick of it, let's say, and putting this book together, did anything surprise you? Were there any aha moments?
You know, there were a few. I didn't really know the history of the company. I knew about AMG as the tuner, but I didn't get into the relationship between Melcher and Aufrecht. And the amazing thing about the internet is that there are so many videos, interviews. There was this interview that Melcher did for a Czechoslovakian talk show called Beside the Pool or something, or At the Swimming Pool. Anyway, it was done in English. And there was a video of it, and it was a wonderful interview of him telling all the trials and tribulations of starting the company. So what amazed me on this particular book was the amount of information that is out there and accessible to fill in the blanks that you wouldn't necessarily get in an interview. There were other books written about AMG, but it didn't go into what kind of racing they did before they really made the big time. And I was able to find these obscure websites that had race reports from like 1965.
Get out.
These off beaten track, and there was some pretty exciting stuff. There was this one race where they were running a bigger, faster car than the other ones, but they did this thing where whoever did the fastest time over the course of the race would win a 1,000 Deutschmark prize. This is in 1965, and AMG actually won that prize. But the guy who was doing it spun out. I found this race report that was just riveting, and I was able to incorporate those kinds of things into the book. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of, like I said, going down rabbit holes. Mercedes was terrific in opening up their archives to me, their online archives. So there's over 300 images in the book, and a good portion of them came from Mercedes and AMG's archives, and it's just wonderful pictures of things. Some of them were unrelated. I have a picture, it's in the second chapter, about when Melker and Aufrecht met. Well, I actually found a picture of a test bench that they used of the period in the Mercedes thing, and I put it in the book, and I said it's likely that Melker and Aufrecht, they used to argue on how the best way to obtain data. I said they probably argued in front of a test bench just like this one. So that part, it was just really a lot of fun doing this book and discovering things and being able to share those in the book.
Wow. What do you hope? So obviously Mercedes enthusiasts, AMG enthusiasts, and both are going to get a lot out of this. What do you hope the reader takes away?
Well, I think sort of the rich history of the auto industry, really, of the last half of the last century. These guys started out as just two young, wild engineers in their 20s, working out of a mill in a little town.
That? Can you imagine that? I can't even I don't mean to cut
you look at AMG and these cars. These cars are 100. They built this car called the AMG 1, which is a hypercar, which is worth over, it was selling for over $1 million, and all the resources of the modern Mercedes Corporation went into building essentially this F1 car for the street.
Yeah.
And then you go back 60 years, and these two guys were digging a pit in the dirt floor of their garage so that they could work underneath these cars. So it's really interesting to see how far the AMG brand has come over the last 60 years.
Yeah, I just can't imagine. It's like thinking about you're going to start a car company. Let's go start doing this. And you just go to your garage.
Right.
What? What are you talking about?
But
it's amazing.
But I think that really underscores sort of human nature, that these guys had a dream. They really wanted to go racing. And at the time, Mercedes was shutting down a lot of their racing programs. And so that's why they left the company, and they were building basically engines for race cars. The great story of how they got on the map was that they, back in the late 60s, early 70s, Mercedes finally put a V8 engine in what essentially was their big S-Class car. And then it was the 300 SL for a 6.3. And so they took that car and they made the engine bigger. They took it out to 6.8 liters. And they took it to a 24-hour race in Belgium at Spa. And this car was so big and heavy, and it was painted red. They called it the Rote Sau, which means in German, it's roughly translated to red pig. It was this big honking car, and it was loud, but it drove, people went crazy over this thing. The car on the pole was actually a Chevy Camaro with a V8 engine. I think there might have been a V8 Mustang in there. And this was the only other V8. The rest were all these small little sporty BMWs and Ford Capris and stuff. And this big lumbering car was just noisy. It finished second and first in class. And It was a big deal after a 24-hour race. And that really, at least the performance world, looked up and took notice of what AMG was. And that really started them on the way.
Man, what a story. I feel like I'm in LA and I'm smelling an adaptation to a documentary or this or that. Just throwing it out there. Come on, come on, man.
It would be.
I'm trying to give you more work.
If you know any producers, let me know. It's a great story on how these guys, the trials and tribulations to get to where they were, because they were sort of frenemies of the factory. There were younger engineers that were their peers who helped them out and moonlighted. And then there was sort of the old guard there, and they just thought these guys were nuts. They were like shade tree mechanics.
Yeah.
You know, how dare we lower ourselves to their level, you know?
Culturally, too, right? Am I wrong on that? Because if in the U.S., we think about the hot rodders in the U.S. and California, that was fine because it's, let's say, a laid-back, looser culture that was going on. But now you think about Germany and you're like, you're
exactly right.
I may be stereotyping, I don't know, but you know more than me. But I feel like even culturally, it would be like, why would we lower ourselves, right?
Right. Well, there was sort of the old guard at the factory, and a lot of these guys had been racing. You know, like the guy, their boss, started working with the race team in the 30s. His name was Rudy Uhlenhaut. And then he also was in charge of developing the 300 SL in the 50s and the Grand Prix program. But by the time these two young, Aufrecht and Melker, were working for him, Uhlenhaut had moved up in the organization and was in charge of passenger car development. Now, you'd think a guy with a big racing background would be boosting these guys up. But he told him, he said in an interview with Esquire magazine, he wasn't sure that racing improved the breed when it came to road cars. So when they came to him with this car that they wanted to go race in 1965 after the factory had said no more racing, he said, okay, you can go race it. If you don't win, you're out of the company. Well, they went and they won that year. They won the touring car championship. Unfortunately, the guy who was their driver got killed in a different event. And the board came down and said, we have to stop all this stuff. And it was after that, within a year or so, Aufrecht and Melker were kind of moonlighting, building racing engines for privateers. They left the company and set up AMG in 1967. So it's a wonderful story. And it was really interesting to do the research on that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Matt, thank you for the history and thank you for taking the time and getting this book done, man.
Great.
I want everybody to definitely go check out a copy of this. We're putting this in the show notes. You're going to have a link so you can just click on it. You can get in on the pre-order. This will be live on November 4th. It's real simple to order from Amazon. And then what I also like, Matt, is your team, the publisher, I should say, over at Motor Books. They created a great little preview on Amazon. So when you look at reading the sample, you can see just a 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 or 6 different pictures of these beautifully laid out book, and just they're beautiful. You get to see the cars. Any car enthusiast is going to love this thing. As far as I can see, it's amazing. Yeah. That being said, Matt, if somebody's watching this or listening to this and they want to continue to follow your work, obviously I'm going to put the link for this or if there's a different website you want to leave or anything else, I'm going to pick up this book. But just in general, how do people follow your journey and your writing?
Well, I actually have a website called Tightwad Garage. It's tightwadgarage.com.
That's great.
And the reason I set that website up is I did another book on electric vehicles. After I retired from Kelley Blue Book, I needed a car. So I bought a 2022 Leaf. And I wrote a book. I self-published a book on how to buy an affordable electric car, and it kind of tells you all the ins and outs of what it's like to own an EV. Unfortunately, the market's changed quite a bit from when I bought my car, and it's not quite as affordable anymore with all the tax incentives going away. But that's my next project is getting back into that book and revamping it to reflect the current market situation. But you can find that and the Mercedes book on my site, tightwadgarage.com.
Fantastic. And for everybody listening again, we'll put that link into the show notes. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show, each and every day bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Matt, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.